And there we are. Hey, folks. Thanks for tuning in to the BAMF podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lafferty. Here is our contractually obligated intro music. And that assures you, gentle viewer, gentle listener, that you're listening to a high quality, a high production values, farm to table, organically sourced podcast. And here with us today is Mr. Craig Campbell from Nerdburger Games. How you doing, sir?
Good, Mike. How are you? It's been a while since we talked.
It's been a few months, yeah. It's always good to have you on, sir. We are here to talk about comedy horror movies and RPGs that emulate them. So let's jump in. Do you have a favorite movie in that kind of a hybrid genre?
Oh boy, that's I have a lot of opinions about the horror genre in general, and horror comedy as a kind of subgenre of that. The horror comedy subgenre is interesting because it's a question of how the comedy is approached, and there are movies that are just like they're just heavy on comedy. There's horrific elements, and there's blood and gore and scary stuff and whatnot. But then they're counterpointed with like very specific humor. A great example of that is Evil Dead 2, which is the sequel to Evil Dead. Was essentially a straight up horror movie, although a low budget one. And Evil Dead 2 is kind of telling that story again, but like, hey, we've got a budget this time and let's make it funny. And it's really over the top and schlocky, and there's like literal slapstick kind of comedy that immediately turns into horror. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's sort of the horror movie that has some elements of comedy built into it, but it's usually like parody. Like the movie is aware of the tropes of horror movies, and so it's kind of making fun of those in very subtle ways. Like an example I put on the list here for that was, I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's a movie called Zombievers,
I love Zombievers, yes.
Which is a parody of rabid animal attack type movies. Also, kind of a parody of zombie movies. It's a parody of Teenagers in the Woods movies. And while it has comedy moments, like there are, the characters deliver deliberately funny lines, it's mostly gets its humor out of the fact that it's beavers. It's like this animal that's like, well, when you think about it, like they've got big teeth, but they're kind of little. Like, couldn't you just punt a beaver away from you? And like how ferocious do they have to be in order to be a real threat? Well, they're zombievers. They're undead, so they never stop coming, and it plays off of that. And it's the humor is there, but it's in the situation. And then there's movies that kind of fall in between, which are parodies, and they play off of the tropes of horror and make are funny out of that, get their funny out of that, but they're also delivering specific punchline jokes and sight gags and things like that. And like maybe the best example of that from the recent the last 20 years or so is the Scary Movie series, where they're literally parodying specific moments from different types of horror movies. So there's like, you get, if you know horror movies, you get the funny. There's some jokes that will land better for you if you know the tropes and you know these other movies, but then they're also delivering legitimate, like, punchline kind of stuff.
Yeah. And keeping the Wayans brothers employed, so that's
they did keep doing those. And it's those are interesting to watch, in that they because they would keep finding different. There's usually like a different movie that was kind of the wraparound story is a parody of a specific movie, and then there's all these other little vignettes in the middle. Like the first one is a parody of like the Scream type Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and the second one is a parody of like the people invited to the the House on the Hill kind of movie, where the people are invited to the wacky haunted house with the weird caretaker, and they kind of go from there. But I think that it, like, that franchise had a shelf life because there would become a point when they kind of parodied all of the well-known stuff.
Yeah.
And so they would kind of run out of material.
Once you mind that vein, you kind of got to wait for some new horror movies.
You got to wait. Yeah, you got to wait 20 years for some new, like, you got to wait till like, okay, now we can parody torture porn movies, and we can parody like the weird like the evil is stalking you movies like It Follows and Final Destination, and wait for those to kind of enter the zeitgeist long term, and then you can start to parody those.
I was trying to think about my own favorite horror comedies for this. Usually I say Tucker and Dale versus Evil, but I think everyone that's like saying you like the first Star Wars movie. Everyone loves that movie.
Well, it's perhaps because it's so overt in its poking fun at a very well-known type of horror movie, which is the kids in the woods in danger movie. Although it's also, if you know your horror movies fairly well, it does play quite nicely with the kind of rural bumpkin fear of the unknown horror movies, like the folk horror of like the rednecks that are like, we don't understand these people, and a bunch of kids come in and they don't understand their ways and they're outsiders. And
it's a nice flip to have the rednecks be the sympathetic characters. But I was thinking about that. I almost said Zombievers. Netflix makes a ridiculously large amount of media, and often it's pretty bad, usually in my opinion. But I saw one 2017 called The Babysitter, which was kind of a teen comedy. Kids probably too old for babysitter. He's 12 or 13. His babysitter is like 17, 18. So there's some tension there. And he gets up late and finds out that, they have a bond. They get along. The dialogue between them is actually kind of cool. But he gets up late and finds out she's in a satanic cult, and they plan on killing him. And the rest of the movie is him, trying to escape from that. And then, as she's dying at the end, they kind of, have a call back to their connection. So segueing to games, Die Laughing is your RPG that seeks to emulate that genre of cinema, right?
Yeah. Die Laughing is a GM-less short play RPG where you are all portraying characters in a horror comedy movie, and you're all going to die, or at least the vast majority are. So the intention is like, hopefully make it funny and memorable and entertaining. And then once your character is gone, you still have things to do because you become a producer on the movie, and it becomes a little bit meta, and you have points that you can spend to do different producer things and continue to influence the story and make things, drive the story forward and make things funny and so forth.
Oh, that's kind of cool. You are crowdfunding this in an interesting way. You're crowdfunding through BackerKit this time instead of a Kickstarter.
Yes. Okay. I'm doing a supplement for the game called Die Laughing 2: Die Laughinger, which gets a chuckle every time from people. And it's more character archetypes to play and get murdered. It's more monsters to do the murdering with. And then it's also like a layer of rules that you can add on top. And it's very simple. They're just called film styles, where you can say, well, we're going to do, here's these characters with this monster, and we're going to make it a self-aware horror movie. So it's going to be along the lines of Scream or Zombieland, where the characters like come from a world where horror movies exist, and they talk about the rules and the tropes of horror movies. And so like the self-aware film style rule set is very simple and just kind of promotes and rewards you for doing things that fit that style.
So I have been really intrigued by GM-less games. How do you crack that nut and Die Laughing? How do you keep things flowing without a GM at the table?
With the argument can be made, and I've heard it many times, that a GM-less game is actually sort of also a GM-full game, because everybody has to kind of pitch in and help to do some of the GM type stuff. It's just you don't have one person dedicated to it. And so in Die Laughing, the way it works is it uses a movie structure, a 3-act film. So you have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Each act has a series of scenes in it that you randomly determine. In any given scene, one person is playing the main character, the lead character for that scene. That scene, everything kind of revolves around them. The person to their right is the director, and so they do the kind of setup and help kind of set the stage for things and kind of set their character in the background and do this sort of GME type things. Okay. And then that director lead character thing kind of rotates around the table so that everybody gets a chance to be lead character and have the scene revolve around them and also be the director.
That is pretty cool. I'm going to check this out. So we're doing pretty well on BackerKit. Looks like you passed your goal with 25 days left to go. Are you doing stretch goals on BackerKit? I haven't delved too much into that, so I don't know if it works the same as Kickstarter or if it's different.
Yeah, they have, the capability of doing stretch goals and everything in there. Given that the supplement is pretty much written and ready to go, and I'm not intending to add content or do anything that's going to, lengthen the turnover time to fulfillment. I'm looking at just a couple other options for stretch goals, and right now the one that's up there is to create form fillable PDF versions of all the character archetypes, which is something that just never got around to doing with the core game, which is to create a form fillable version of each of the characters. Mm-hmm. So just to make it easier for people who want to have it on their phone or tablet, or if you're playing online, you can just have your character sheet up there and you don't have to worry about having a piece of paper to mark up. You can just you enter a few things on the page because the characters are exceedingly simple. So it's just a question of putting together that little packet of PDFs that you can just fill out that information. So that's we're as we speak, we are very close to hitting that stretch goal.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like we are out of a $1,000 goal. You were closing in on 2,000, which I'm guessing is the threshold for the form fillable PDFs. So nice. 75 backers, 25 days left. I have just I've been really happy for your success the last few years, Craig. It's nice to see you branching out and trying different crowdfunding solutions, but it seems like you've really found a way to build an audience and kind of keep their attention. So kudos to you for doing that. Well,
thank you. It's a weird place to be in, right? In that kind of niche realm of indie, like, I'm doing it on the side. It's mostly me, but then hiring freelancers to help and do all the stuff that I don't know how to do or don't want to do. Just, I've had some of the games do really well and they kickstart well and they sell well after the fact and everything. And then I've had some that, they just kind of squeak by and they never really sell a lot, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm in the enviable position of this not being my day job. So I can kind of work on my own schedule. I can put stuff up when I want to. And if something, doesn't capture the imagination, then okay, that's fine. Move on.
Yeah. So let me ask you, let's say I'm hearing this podcast. I'm like, I love this idea. This sounds like a fun, casual game to do, some weekend when maybe the D&D game is on pause. Can I jump feet first into Die Laughing 2, Die Laughinger, or do I need to check out the original to really understand what's going on?
Well, the Die Laughing 2 is a supplement. It's just additional stuff. You need the core book in order to play the game, because that's the book. That's the product that defines it. It gives you the full rules and it gives you the scene, the act and scene structure with all the scene prompts and things. The supplement just has additional characters, monsters, and alternate rules.
I see there's a $25 pledge level that gives you the core game and the supplements all in one neat package. So that's probably the way to go if you're getting into it for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, with the supplement, why not offer up the core game as well? The biggest challenge with that is just getting the point across to people when you're talking about it or when you're like throwing it up on social media or something, is to, like, somebody sees like, oh, that's a supplement for a game I've never heard of, swipe and just move right along. Well, you have to kind of make sure, like, hey, you can get the core book too. So and a little cheaper, to entice people to check it out. But when you're in this, kind of weird indie space where, it's just a question of who happens through Kickstarter or BackerKit that day, or who happens to see my Twitter feed, or who happens to see some AP that's running my game, you just kind of have to, you do it when you can, and just, like this, a supplement is a great chance to put the core game back out in front of people again.
Drive those back catalog
after the fact. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. We made a little tiny URL just so when I say this link in a few seconds, it'll be easier to roll off the tongue. tinyurl.com/dielaughing2 is where
the number two.
The number 2. Yep. Dos. Zwei. Die Laughing 2. And take it back. You get 25 days left to back. It looks like a lot of fun. Craig, any closing thoughts before we wrap things up?
Oh, not in particular. Watch Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Watch trauma films. If you are a horror aficionado, if you love horror movies, watch Cabin in the Woods and have your pause button ready for some of the spots where you can like really dig deep into. I love Cabin in the Woods for the sheer breadth of horror movies and horror movie ideas and tropes that it plays with. And there's definitely like that's got rewatchability or like, you know, pause button fun to happen.
You know, I'm still to this day kind of amazed Cabin in the Woods got made. I mean, I really enjoy it. It's a fun movie, but it's so, as you say, very meta. And it's kind of,
it is very meta.
Yeah, sort of dissembling a lot of tropes of the, you know, it's kind of like Last Action Hero. I enjoyed that movie too, but I'm like, how do you? I mean, it's a blockbuster that kind of appeals to a very narrow niche of, you know, the audience who like to think about these kind of things. But
that's a really good comparison. I hadn't thought of that. It is to horror movies what Last Action Hero is to 80s and 90s style action movies.
Yeah, it's fun. I like it, even with my misgivings about Joss Whedon these days. I still watch that every once in a while. But yeah, I was trying to think of.
For the record, it was co-written and directed by Drew Goddard, so that makes you feel better.
This is true. This is true. Would you consider Return of the Living Dead? Remember that the 80s zombie movie sequel has kind of got a punk rock sort of veneer to it. Would you call that a horror comedy, or is that more straight horror with just a few jokes salted in here and there?
That movie series is really bizarre because Return of the Living Dead is very clearly a parody of Night of the Living Dead. It goes so far as to say the reason we have these zombies in this bin, you know, in this tub barrel inside of this medical waste or medical warehouse is because Night of the Living Dead was real, and they took some of the zombies and they stored them. And so then it plays off of all the tropes of zombie movies in general. And then Return of the Living Dead 2 is kind of a parody of the first one. Going so far as to have some of the actors in the second movie playing characters different than what they were in the first one. And then Return of the Living Dead 3 follows in the series, but it is a straight horror movie. It goes backwards from the way Evil Dead was. It goes from comedy to being a straight movie in the series, whereas Evil Dead went from being a straight horror movie to becoming more and more comedic as the series went along. Yeah. Although Evil Dead, technically, if you consider like the remake of Evil Dead and Ash versus Evil Dead, like the remake of Evil Dead was pretty much a straight horror movie. Not the remake, the kind of continuation.
Yeah. It's
10 years ago.
Has it been that long? Oh God.
Something like that. 8, 9, 10 years.
So it's definitely an interesting series, the way it's progressed. So all right. Well, hey, cool. Let's see. Any closing thoughts? Die Laughing 2. You can find it right now on BackerKit, tinyurl.com/dielaughing2. 25 days. Looks like a lot of fun. I'd recommend you check it out. Closing thoughts, Craig?
Check it out. Play more games. Try all sorts of things.
Cool. Well, thanks for checking out the BAMF podcast, and we will catch you next time.